Welcome to the Planeswalker Project.
What's up everybody, so today I want to revisit a commander that I covered quite a while ago over at the AetherHub, Ezuri the Claw of Progress. So recently I've been looking at some of the tribal commander decks that I play, and being a fan of elves in particular, I wanted to take a look at some other potential commanders for elves, and one of the unique things about this incarnation of Ezuri is the access to blue. His abilities are very in line with what a Simic strategy wants to go with, and so we're going to take that idea and run with it. Before we get into the deck, I want to briefly cover some of the key points of this strategy. For starters, +1/+1 counters are going to be our friends here. Ezuri benefits the most from tiny creatures hitting the battlefield, and this is going to help maximize our experience boost. So the vast majority of our creature base is going to be small elf creatures. We can use Ezuri's second ability to put enough +1/+1 counters on one of our creatures to make something as seemingly harmless as a Llanowar elf into a dangerous beater. Now, at the time of recording this video, there is no way to remove experience counters from a player, so once you get them, they're not going anywhere. This doesn't matter whether or not Ezuri is destroyed or removed from the field, you retain those counters. This is going to be vital as we do run a number of methods that are going to gain us tons of experience points. We have a few cards that are either going to glean us plenty of experience in one move, or they're going to utilize the counters in a dirty way that's going to put us into a good position to win. Third goal of this deck is something that any elf player will be likely familiar with: Manna Ramp. Ramp is the cornerstone of any elven strategy, and being in the commander format, the ability to churn out mana early game is going to be vital to us winning quickly. This deck features perhaps the most amount of ramp of any deck I've built thus far, between dropping extra lands per turn, to creatures that tap for mana, to creatures that will generate extra mana each turn. We also run a pseudo token sub-theme. Elves do have some token production, and given that most of the time these tokens will come out as 1/1 creatures, we're going to benefit with Ezuri's experience trigger. Now then, let's begin. We're going to begin with the most important aspect of this deck, the mana dorks. These will be our early plays and will be what helps set us up to begin running. Llanowar Elves and Elvish Mystic are ideal first turn creature drops. They give us access to 3 mana on turn 2, and while I don't quite consider it a mana dork, we do also have Jiraga Tree Speaker, who can be leveled up enough to make 2 green mana, and then after level 5, all of our elves can tap for 2 mana. Coiling Oracle, a bit of a weird image for an elf, is incredible as it offers us extra land drop or a nice cantrip effect. Wood Elves is a personal favorite of mine, being able to tutor for a forest card, and this search is not limited to just basic lands. Oracle Moldiah offers an additional land drop and access to the top card of our library should that card be a land. Sakura Tribe Elder can be sacked in a pinch to search for a land, and the Gyre Sage synergizes greatly with Ezuri, as the larger she grows, the more mana she produces. Now, similar to the Gyre Sage, but perhaps a little better, the Crystalline Crawler can remove a +1/+1 counter to add a mana to our mana pool. This works so nicely with Ezuri, as we can dump more counters on it to produce more mana. It's also inherently a 1/1 creature, so even if you remove all of its counters, it's not going to die. The two big contenders of elf-based mana production, the Elvish Archdruid and the Priest of Titania, will take our elf population and turn it into a sea of growing and flowing green mana. So as you can see right off the bat, this deck will be hard pressed to be mana screwed at any point in the game. So now let's take a look at what we want to do with those +1/+1 counters. This is going to be what takes our little itty bitty elves and it turns them deadly. Going down our list, the Bane of Progress is unique in that it hits the battlefield as a 2/2, which triggers Ezuri's ability, and then it proceeds to blow up every artifact and enchantment in play, only to become ginormous with counters. The Champion of Lambholt will make our board increasingly difficult to handle. The Fathom Mage, a creature I desperately wished was an elf, not only has evolve and it gets larger as we play our creatures, but it also offers us card draw for giving her those counters. The Forgotten Ancient offers a nice bang for our counters, it racks them up between our upkeep steps, and then it gives us the ability to shift the counters from it to other creatures. The Herald of Secret Streams, a newcomer from the Ixalan set, makes our creatures with counters on them unblockable. It's also a 2/3, which triggers Ezuri's experience ability. Immaculate Magistrate is a huge threat in that we can dump a ton of +1/+1 counters onto a creature with the more elves we control. The best part is that this creature does not have to be an elf, so that Crystalline Crawler that's hurting for some more counters can be a prime target. Jiraga Warcaller is a lord for elves that gives a larger buff the more counters we stack up on it. Master Biomancer, the pinnacle of Simic elves, lets our other creatures come into play with a minimum of 2 additional +1/+1 counters on them. And while this might negate Ezuri's ability, it can also spell trouble for opponents should we start dropping the bigger creatures. Plaxcaster Frogling offers an interesting ability. For just 2 mana, we can give a target creature with a +1/+1 counter on it Shroud until the end of turn, which is a nice trick to come in play should one of our big creatures be targeted by removal. This deck does have a vulnerability to removal spells, something to keep in mind when considering this card. Prime Speaker Zagana offers a huge amount of card draw and is another big threat, and while this is one of the higher costing spells to play, there's very rarely an instance when you play this card that it will not benefit you. Spike Weaver happens to be a great card to dump counters onto. For just 1 mana, you can remove a counter from it and then you fog your opponent. If this has at least 4 counters on it by the end of your turn, you can effectively render yourself safe from harm during each of your opponent's turns. And lastly, and perhaps the stupidest card in this deck, is the Sage of Hours. You can store up a ton of counters on it, and then after removing all of them from it, for each 5 counters you remove, you can take an additional turn. So should Ezuri be at least 5 experience, you can basically take infinite turns. This is generally one of the few unfun cards of this deck, as you usually will end up winning the game after going off with this, or you get hated off the table because you played it. So it's funny, I actually built this deck after finding one interesting infinite combo that, while it's not game breaking or game winning on its own, it'll definitely put you in a powerful position should you be able to get it off uninterrupted. The Turntimber Ranger and the Arcane Adaptation. If you play the Arcane Adaptation and pick the ally creature type, every creature you own, every creature in play, everything that's not in play becomes an ally. Then you cast the Ranger, and every time an ally comes into play, itself included, you create a 2/2 wolf token and put a +1/+1 counter on it. Now, since the wolf that you create becomes part ally, it'll trigger the Turntimber Ranger to create another wolf, and it earns another +1/+1 counter. This is a controlled infinite combo, as you may choose to not continue the cycle at some point should your wolf pack become too large or whatever. Keep in mind that since both the Ranger and the Wolves enter the battlefield as 2/2 creatures, they will also trigger Ezuri's experience ability. So you can easily jump to 1,000,000 experience plus off of this combo. And it's a little janky because there's no real way to tutor for the enchantment, but I love the interaction that it inspired this deck into. Maybe convert those 1,000,000 experience points to +1/+1 counters on that Sage of Hour. Just a thought. Now, we will want to include a few ways to help speed this deck up in grabbing cards. That combo doesn't really do a whole lot outside of itself, so we will want ways to either tutor for creatures or just draw into them. Sylvan Library, a card I feel that no green commander deck can't benefit from, will offer us up to 2 extra cards each turn. Rhystic Study offers a cute little tax on your opponent's spells that, if unpaid, will just net you extra card draw. You can draw a lot of cards quickly should your opponent be unwilling to spend that extra 1 mana. Green Sun Zenith and Court of Calling can help tutor for the creature we need, and both are very valuable to get early on. Some games you might not want to shoot for that silly Turntimber combo, and so these are able to snag something else should you want to use so. For once, I've built a commander deck that runs Planeswalkers that coincidentally fit in very nicely with the theme. Freya Least, the Llanowar's Fury, gives us a Llanowar elf on her plus ability, and she also comes with a Naturalize ability. She can also give us a ton of card draw should she last long enough to ultimate off. We also run 2 forms of Nissa. We have the Voice of Zendikar that synergizes with everything this deck wants to do, and the Steward of Elements to act as some much needed card ramp. Curiously, all 3 of these walkers are also elves. It's totally planned. One of the things that this deck does falter to is board wipes. We are highly vulnerable to board wipes. We put a lot of investment into a few creatures. Putting +1/+1 counters on them doesn't give us a return should those creatures die to a board wipe. So we want to be able to rush in for the kill as quickly as we can. The point of this deck was to offer a ton of ramp into our bigger threats just to get as quick as possible of a win. I personally aim to get that aforementioned Turntimber combo out just because I like the idea of spinning out a huge number of wolves and overrunning the board. Nothing can ruin our strategy quicker than a Wrath effect or a Cyclonic Rift, though we actually don't run anything for the Cyclonic Rift. While I personally don't run any counter spells in my build though, you can consider running some counter magic to take care of those threats, such as the OG counterspell or Mystic Snake, another card to get Ezuri experience. Now that the bulk of the spells are out of the way, let's talk mana base. When building my mana bases, I generally look at two things. I look for lands that come to play untapped, which to me and my playstyle is very crucial. The majority of the lands I choose to run for any deck that tap for 2 colors or more don't come into play tapped, as I feel this really hurts my tempo. I dislike taking a turn off just to play a 3-drop because on turn 3 my one land had to come into play tapped. Some lands I run that produce multiple colors in this deck though are Breeding Pool, Flooded Grove, the Hinterland Harbor, and Yavimaya Coast. I also include Temple of Mystery for the Scry, Colony Garden, which is doubly useful in producing that plant, the Llanowar Reborn, which gives us a +1/+1 counter, Mosswort Bridge that can help cheat in a spell should I control 10 more power, Oran Reef the Vastwood and Novision, Heart of Progress, both excellent options to give +1/+1 counters out, and of course Rogue's Passage to make a creature unblockable. I like keeping Rogue's Passage in hand in the event that an opponent thinks they can just jump block one of my biggest creatures that I've stashed away a billion counters on, only to drop it just before going into combat. I guess you're not blocking it after all. For the complete list of this deck, which also includes the cards that we did not talk about in this video, a link to the tapped out page for this deck will be included in the video's description. So what do you think of Ezuri Claw of Progress? I feel that the Commander 2015 commanders, really the only one that shone out greatly was Marin. Most people that talk about 2015 Commander talk about Marin of Clan Nal Toth, because she is the more competitive one of the lot. And this form of Ezuri is often overshadowed by his original form for the mana sink win condition, offering a powerful end to an elf ball strategy. And while this deck might not play out in the same manner as Ezuri Renegade Leader, I feel this is a fun strategy that really captures a Simic elf's plan. Now my question to you, the viewer, what cards would you consider for this build? Are there cards we didn't include you feel might help this deck work better? Is there a way you run this commander that is different from the way that we talked about today? Let's talk about it in the comments section below. I hope you enjoyed this commander deck guide. Remember to like and share this video with your commander playgroup. Which commander do you want to see us cover next? Let me know. You can follow me on Twitter for all the latest updates on upcoming projects, and you can like our Facebook page to get notifications on uploads. Or you can join the notification squad here on YouTube and hit that little bell next to the subscribe button. If you'd like to help us improve our content quality, you can consider becoming a patron sponsor of the channel over at our Patreon. And as always, I will see you all at the next upkeep.